I see burnout as to where it's almost like you have this your perspective shifts and you can't see beyond the task. Like you're just like, this is it. I'm done here.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think the tough thing about this word creative burnout is it's so relative.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Archive Podcast. We are on episode
15. Took a couple weeks off.
We did.
That's on me.
That's not on you.
I was gone. I was traveling. It would have been a little stressful to try to squeeze it in. Probably not very valuable or efficient. The episodes wouldn't have been. So I'm glad we took a couple weeks off. 15. Also, podcasting is not the easiest thing ever.
Yeah, I would agree.
This is a lot.
Yeah, it took us. So, okay, let's list out for the people. What are we shooting on? We'll start there.
So we shoot with 3 Canons, R5, R6, C70. So number one, that takes, like, if you're not a camera person, it takes a little bit to get everything set up. We've gotten a good groove. It takes us probably 10 minutes pre-production, post-production like 30 minutes, which is crazy to edit a 40-minute podcast.
It takes more time to transfer the footage off the SD cards than it does to actually like post-process.
Yeah. But we've both been busy, and then and we were like, all right, let's just take a couple weeks off, get back into the saddle, get back on the posting schedule, which some people might not even care or notice, but we do.
Yeah. And also, we're grown men. We don't need to justify our 2-week break.
No.
But listen, we do have a fun topic for today I am excited about. But it is Halloween, the day that we're recording. It's even a little bit of spooky weather outside.
Yes, I love it. So if you can see like the doors in the background, I mean, this is 11 a.m. Usually 11 a.m., like light shining through. It's bright in here. Like I was even like looking at the lights like, did we miss something? But that's just... It's gloomy today.
Yeah, our internal ND filters felt like they needed to keep turning lower stops. Okay, so are you dressing up for Halloween tonight?
No.
I'm not either.
No.
What is Ivy dressing up as?
My little daughter's going to be a strawberry, adorable little strawberry, and she loves like having the outfit on because she's got like a little hat that goes with it. It's very cute, and so hopefully the rain holds off and we're able to enjoy Halloween to the fullest. What about your girls?
Listen, I'm going to first off join you. I'm in full denial that it's going to rain today. I normally am a weather addict. Yeah. I'm like not looking at it and trying to act like if I don't acknowledge it, it'll go away. Nora is dressed up as a new to me movie, Descendants. I've not seen it before. Yeah. It's great singing. Like it was a good musical movie. And then Ellie is a witch. Or at least that's what they were. We've got some costume changes. We've been to different trick or treat things. I don't really know, but what I do know is I will continue raising them to understand what the dad tax is. And so when they get the sour stuff in their candy bowls.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is my first year. I just thought of that.
Yeah. And listen, you have to do it for the health of your daughter.
Well, and my daughter is 8 months old. So the dad tax is 100% this year.
That's exactly right. I mean, listen, you gotta think of, she can't be, you don't want her to, you don't want
I don't want bad habits forming.
Habits.
So I will take the burden away from her.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so today we're getting into talking about how to have fun in your life, to find joy, to find fun. One of the things I feel like I keep running into is talking to friends of mine who, some of them own their own businesses, some of them work for a large organization, small businesses, whatever. But they're just like so in the grind. They have a hard time finding or prioritizing fun. Maybe they're married. Maybe they're dating. Maybe they're single. Maybe they have kids. Maybe they don't. But it seems like everyone is identifying with this problem of why does it seem like so much work to have fun?
I think the biggest issue, I ran into this 2 years ago. I had a lot of clients that I knew of because I was shooting a lot of weddings. And so I was kind of in that cycle of getting the clients that I went to college with or I was friends with already. And so with that, a lot of my clients were like friends I had on social media. And what I realized is there was a little bit of like this pressure to have fun because I knew they were waiting on something from me. And so I felt like I couldn't even post on social media because I was like, they're going to think I'm not even acknowledging like their projects. And so that really ate me alive for a while. Like, and I know that might sound silly, but I love posting on social media. Like, I love it. It's like my little, I've talked about it before on here. It's my little creative little outlet daily. So when that like was taken away from me because I felt so much pressure of like, I can't enjoy anything because I have to make it seem like I'm always working, or people like their projects are important. So if I'm posting, they're not going to think that. And finally I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I got to the point of creative burnout, right? And finally, I flipped the switch. I was like, no, I need to enjoy my life first, because what will follow are better results with work.
Without a doubt. And I'm glad that you said that about like the pressure from clients, because I have felt that, and I've never really said that out loud to anybody else, because that is a thing. And I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with someone, but years ago, like before I went to work for the school system, I had a boss who I got pulled into a disciplinary meeting because I had filmed Instagram stories ahead of time and then was posting them days later.
Yeah.
And in fact, I still do that a lot. Like like Instagram stories, because I'll batch them out when I'm not able to do things because of the way I do my Instagram stories. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But like once that gets said to you, that lives in the back of your brain.
Yeah.
And even though I have owned my own business now for 4 years, like I am my own boss, and yet sometimes I'll hear that voice in my head. And so I think it's just a reality of realizing like, hey, it's okay. Because the beautiful thing about social media is, I think especially for us, is not only is it a creative outlet, but it's a little bit of it's like our playground. It's where we experiment. Yeah. Right? So, all right, let's get into it. I want to ask you this question. What leads to creative burnout?
I would say not having boundaries and not taking care of what's important first. And so one of the things I've thought about since becoming a dad, like becoming a dad has truly clarified all aspects of my life. I don't know if this happened to you when you became a dad. Whenever Ivy was born, I really started to see clearly what was important versus what was not important. And so with the creative burnout, what is hard sometimes is to determine what is important in work or in life as well. And so when I wasn't taking care of myself first, that was one of the things, like whenever Ivy was born, I realized was like, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's not selfish to make sure you're taken care of before your work. All it is making sure it is sustainable in the long run. So like this is a conversation I was having with a family member the other day. She's really big into working out, into lifting, and she was at my house, and I was just talking. I was like, I want to implement health because I want to take care of myself to be a better dad. It's not that like I'm selfish and I don't want to spend time with my family. I need that so that I can have enough energy to be with my family and to go out through a 8-hour workday and then come home and still have enough gas in the tank for my family. So creative burnout is kind of just not realizing taking care of the little important things that we need to have a sustainable month or week or whatever it be.
This is an unfair characterization, but perhaps will help speak to the broad terms. In your 20s, you're figuring out what your boundaries are. What are you capable of?
Yeah.
How hard can you push against the envelope? And for some of us, at least it was for me, it's finding that, like, what's the edge before I tip over into bad habits.
Finding that is a bad thing at all.
No.
It is one of the most important things you find in your life.
Totally. And when I say bad habits, specifically what I mean is like working too hard to where you begin to invade on other areas of your life. And not bad habits, again, like Coke, like snorting a line of Coke. Right. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like when you begin to do things that are unsustainable in the long run. But that's what, in my mind, your 20s are for finding your boundaries. In your 30s, and listen, these are all just rough estimates, but I feel like that's the season of beginning to say, okay, let's begin to rein this in and begin to find that. Now, if you find it earlier, hey man, hats off to you. Yeah. You are wise beyond your years. But for me, that was kind of the thing that I saw in myself and in some of my friends who were in similar work. The thing I will say about creative burnout is it's almost like a fire. creative burnout often happens when you don't realize that, much like tending to a campfire, the moment that you forget that you need proper fuel, proper air, and the ignition source there, the spark that you keep inspiration by, is the moment that the fire begins to go out. And so, like, I would break it down by saying, okay, what is the fuel that you're burning? What is that fuel? What is it? The love that you have from your relationship with your family or your friends. But then I think the oxygen to it is exactly what you were talking about. It's, where am I taking care of the other parts of my life? Am I sleeping well? Am I working out? Am I eating decently well? That's all oxygen to that creative fire. And then the spark, the inspiration, that's the fun. That's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to move us on to the second chapter if you're ready for it. Do you want to spend a little more time here?
I want to think, I want to throw these out too. A fire is a great analogy because it's harder to restart a fire. It's so much easier just to keep it going. So we were talking about this yesterday, because we're in kind of two different seasons of life. I'm kind of in that, I'm 26 right now. I am in the hustle right now, and I love it. And I want to take full advantage because I do know there are some things that I could say no to. And so maybe we got people listening, you're thinking in your life, okay, I am a little overloaded and there probably are some things I could say no to, but what if I see this thing through for a few more months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years? And so a lot of the things I do in my life right now, even though I am very busy, some weeks, I'm working 60 hours right now. But for me, I know that if I stay true to it just for a little bit, I'm not the hustle culture guy that's always got to keep your head down, got to be going. I'm not that guy. I do think you get results from hard work. I believe it. The good thing about the U.S. is if you work hard, I truly believe good things can happen, and it's not that hard if you just put your head down and go. But I'm in that season where I know some of the things that I'm putting a lot of my energy into will see rewards in the next year or two. There is benefits of creative burnout. I truly believe that.
Tell me more about that, because I'm interested to hear what your view is on this.
Some of the things that I've reaped the benefits from in my life. So I've talked about weddings a ton on this podcast, and I'll just continue to do that. Weddings have given me a lot of leverage in this season of my life. So right now, especially on social media, I'm kind of really shifting. I don't post hardly anything about weddings right now. And weddings are just kind of sprinkling in naturally, organically, because I put in 3 years of that, really what was creative burnout. The weddings created, they developed creative burnout in my life, but now they just organically are falling into my lap because of the work I put into it. I think that was a benefit of creative burnout. I kept my head down, I kept going, even though it was tough at times, even though I didn't want to do it. I was in that season of creative burnout. I just kept my head down and kept going. And so now I use those weddings as leverage. I think that's one of the benefits is you get to this point where, you're creatively burnt out, but also all the work you've done up to that point now leads to something organic that you don't have to push as much.
Can we wrestle on this point a little bit? I'm curious if you think that the creative burnout was necessary or was the result of, it's okay. So here's how, let's maybe define definitions real quick. I would see burnout as the thing where you wake up and this is just a short description. You wake up and you're like, I'm done. This isn't working anymore. You don't have any of that internal motivation, no matter how hard you try to continue doing those things. Versus you're in a tough season where you're grinding it out. I see that burnout and that kind of tough, gritty season. Those are not the same thing in my mind. Do you see those as the same thing?
A little bit, but I think even though you wake up with that internal non-motivation, I still did it in those seasons, even though it was a little bit of just clockwork. I'm just going to do it. Like, there was hardly any motivation, but it's like a lot of people experience that, I think. A lot of people are going to their jobs with not a lot of motivation, but you still put your head down and you do it. That, in my eyes, that's what creative burnout is to me. Like, you don't feel like doing it, but you do it anyways, and there might not be a lot of passion behind it. With the opposite is maybe like you're thinking, maybe your definition is like you hit a wall and you're done.
Yeah, I think that's, so when I would think of times in my life, and there is, and I forget it, man, if it's Cal Newport or whoever it is, has done like actual research on what the definition of burnout is. So I would say, for all intents and purposes here, we are just talking about like our understanding of it. I think burnout is one of those things where I think of things that are in the same ballpark as burnout would be seasons of high anxiety, seasons of situational depression, seasons of very low motivation, very low passion, like you're describing, and almost to where in the seasons where you're, let's say you're in the middle of wedding season and you're just grinding through it because that's just part of the season. But you know that there's going to be a time coming up where you're going to be able to take some off time and kind of recuperate. I see those as different. I see burnout as to where it's almost like you have this your perspective shifts and you can't see beyond the task. Like you're just like, this is it. I'm done here.
Yeah. And I think the tough thing about this word creative burnout is it's so relative.
Oh gosh, that's such a good point.
For me, I've never hit like a wall where I'm like not wanting to do something for a month or two. I think that's the difficult thing I'm having with this like definition, is because I've never done that. I've hit like a week wall. For me, that feels like an eternity. And so maybe I'm just like not being charismatic to that. Like other people's definition of creative burnout is like not being able to like find that motivation, passion for months. And that's never been my case. So I think that may be the difference in this conversation.
Well, and I don't think it's, so I don't hear you having a lack of empathy.
Yeah.
I just think that you're helping give voice to people who've had your experience. I may be giving voice to people who've had my experience. And I think there's probably a lot of people who have like a third perspective on this. But I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that creative burnout does happen.
Yeah.
Burnout of all types happen. So let's begin to think through then when we consider how did we escape those seasons. So when you think of, man, all right, I'm done with weddings, feeling burnt out on these. How did you begin to escape that season?
So I made this rule. And I think I implemented this in 2022. I made this rule where every day I would do 3 things that I love / are important to me. And so the rule even beyond that is before I start, and again, this is relative too. I was working at home. I had my own business. So I totally get it. I don't want to speak like out of character. Most people can't do these things. If you have a job you have to go to, or maybe you can, you just prioritize it. But for me, it was like, I'm going to do something for myself first before I start work. And so for me, that was usually like running or something along those lines. And so before I ever touched my work that day, I would make sure that like I was taken care of mentally. Like regardless, I was controlling what I could control, which was like, I'm going to take care of my run, and I know I've won that little aspect that day. That was like the easiest and probably most impactful little change I made in that season.
I'm really curious, though. I want you to tell me, what are the other 2 things? So something for yourself.
Yeah.
What were 2 of the other things that you found? Because I think this is the type of stuff that gets me excited, like practical tools that people can use.
I would think like probably I did a lot of reading. And reading it for me is something that I think I only do when life is like really good. That's always been like, or like there's this correlation between like when things are going really good in my life, when I feel like I'm kind of clicking, I'm usually reading. I don't know. So I was like, and I identified that. So I was like, let me just read and see if it follows. Because Matthew McConaughey said in his book, he writes these journals about his good and bad times in life, and whenever he's going through bad times, he goes back to the good times, and he just kind of like does a thing like, what was I eating? What was I drinking? What was I reading? What was I watching? Let me just start doing those things and see if like I can bounce back. And so that's what I kind of did. I was like, all right, I know when I'm reading, like life is usually good, so let me just see if I can trick the system and read, and life will just like get a little bit better. That was kind of like one of the other things I did. And then probably the third thing was, I think it was taking more time for myself and setting healthy boundaries within my schedule. And so when a certain time would hit, I'm done working at in the evening or something like that. I think this is something you've always been good at, and I think it helps a lot, is setting time boundaries.
My wife would probably argue with me or with you, or your point about being good at it. I'm trying to get better at it. One of the things I really appreciate about what you said is, depending upon people's situation, these things can mean different things.
Correct.
So, for instance, my thing, and I've talked about this multiple times, but 5:30 a.m. gym class every morning, and that's just what I do. 6 days a week, I'm there. And for me, that works, but there's functional reasons that works for me. I've got 2 young kids at home. They are all still asleep. My wife's at home.
Yeah.
But if you're a single parent, like that's not something that you can do. So it might just be finding your version of that. You were running, what's something, I mean, there are plenty of things on, and I'm just like talking super practical here for a minute. There's the Apple subscription of fitness things like videos and workout plans. There's stuff on YouTube. And I think it's just getting creative about what are the ways that you can take care of yourself. And I will say this would be kind of my one, I would just like to put a +1 on what you said. Getting up just a few minutes earlier than you normally do, if you always feel rushed in the morning, to have 5 quiet minutes by yourself. 15, 20. I like to be up an hour or 2 before I have to be anywhere, simply just to allow myself to warm up to the day. I think that makes a massive difference. If we cannot go into the day rushed and feel all those feelings of anxious, like, do I have everything? I think there is something to trying to be as calm as we can, collected as we can, not only for ourselves, but for the impact we bring on others in the areas that we go to. I don't think that's just a personality trait. I think that's something that we can all grow in. So.
Well, if you're someone and you're thinking, I'm so creatively burnt out right now, I have no free time, wake up 12 minutes earlier every day for yourself, because then you've pretty much bought back an hour and a half a week of free time just by getting up 12 minutes earlier. So stack little wins like that. And so then maybe it's 20 minutes, and then you've opened up 2 to 2.5 more hours of free time every week. Okay, what happens if I do 1 hour every day? I'm gonna wake up a little earlier. You've just bought back 7 hours of free time that you didn't have before, simply by making a little change to your routine that just sets you up a little bit better.
Well, and this is a good bridge into what are the small ways we can introduce joy and happiness into our everyday. And I think there's going to be some people who are like, yes, but you don't know my situation. I've got a young kid at home, all these different things. And here's the deal. We're not saying that you have to do any of these things. I don't want anyone's reaction to this to be, well, must be nice. Yeah. Because I think first off, that attitude is a losing attitude. And listen, I'm not one of these guys that's like, you have to be a winner and winners don't complain.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a certain point where I think we have to, and my mom was really good at this. She would look at us and she would say, you can do anything for 6 weeks. You can do anything for 6 months, 2 years, et cetera. And she would always, expand it out. And her point with that is it is a conscious decision to choose how you're responding to a challenge set before you. And one of the things I love, and I don't remember if it was Epictetus who said this, I'm having a hard time remembering. Anyways, the point is there's an ancient writer who said, I pity people who go through their entire lives and never meet a worthy opponent. Now, he wasn't talking about like an actual person, but an opponent, something that challenges you to find what you're capable of. Yeah. And so I think oftentimes the approach of responding to conversations like this, well, it must be too nice. You got, 2 young white guys who have everything afforded to them in the world. Yes, you could say that. And I'm not going to deny the things and the opportunities that I've been given in my life. But what I am also saying is, is there's a certain point where I think if we can all join together and encourage one another, okay, you might not be able to do this right now, but what's something that you can do?
Yeah.
Let's ask that question. What's a small moment of joy that you can have? And so one of the things I had written down here is I call it the emergency fund plan, right? And this is anybody. Like, who is one person that you can call that if you get into a bad moment, like, they can cheer you up?
Yeah.
What are the top 3 TikTok or Instagram accounts that you're going to go to that are going to make you laugh? Like, hey, listen, if I see a funny cat video, it's got me every time, man. Yeah. It's worked ever since I was a junior in high school. So it's like, it's getting really creative about these ideas, and it's choosing to say, I'm not going to give into this season of burnout, and I'm going to find a way to get out of it.
Yeah. Jesse Itzler created a calendar. And so the calendar, and I've sent you this calendar. I used it this year a little bit. I like the philosophy. I don't like the physical calendar, so I threw the calendar away. But I love the philosophy behind it. It is a calendar all about having fun. And this, Jesse Itzler, I've mentioned his name so many times on this podcast because he is such a successful man, businessman. I mean, partial owner of the Atlanta Hawks. Like, he's got it figured out. But his biggest thing is, like, how do I squeeze the joy, all the joy out of my life? How do I capitalize on it to the fullest? He created this calendar. One of the things in the calendar he implements that I love is every 8 weeks he has to go on a mini adventure. He has to do a mini adventure. And so over the span of a year, he should have 6 mini adventures he's done. And over the span of 20 years, whatever that math is, like 120, I guess, you know. So over the span of 20 years, he should have 120 adventures that he did. And this was one of his friends that came up with this rule. It's called Kevin's rule. And so every 8 weeks, he has on his calendar that mini adventure. And if he can't give himself or his family one mini adventure every 8 weeks, his life is out of tune. His life is out of balance is basically what he says. And I totally agree with him. If you can't set aside every 8 weeks for yourself one thing that challenges you, one thing that excites you, one thing that gets you pumped, because what happens is when you start really prioritizing those things that you love in life, or maybe those things that you're a little scared about, like an adventure that kind of gets your adrenaline going. If you can't prioritize those things, something's out of tune. And so I think it's not a certain thing that you do to get back joy. It's a certain shift in your perspective to say, am I even prioritizing what's important and what I love to do? That for me is like one of the biggest takeaways about his calendar release that I took away.
Perspective shifts are the fundamental thing that changes for people, their outlook on life, right? I mean, perspective is a change of outlook. One of the things that we do every night with the girls before they fall asleep is once everybody's in bed, night lights are on, everyone is mostly under the covers. Yeah. It's like, okay, tell me something today that you're thankful for or that you're grateful for. It doesn't matter how bad of a day it is. And the rule has to be something specific, but there is no size qualification for it. So it can quite literally be, I'm thankful that my covers are warm, or I'm thankful that I got to ride with mom to school today, or whatever it might be. Because I know that if I can orient their minds to end every day with gratitude, I am teaching them to look back through their day and training their brain to do that. And I think that going back to what you said a moment ago, it doesn't have to be these big things. It can quite literally be you spend zero money and all you change is right here. And you make the active choice. I am choosing not to look at the positive, but to choose gratitude, which I can say, even in the season where my mom was going through cancer and all these things happened and she eventually died, even in those moments, because I had done the work ahead of time, I found gratitude even that night before I went to bed, the day that she died. I still found things to be grateful for. And I think that that's the reality of it. I'm just talking about be an active player in your life, man. Be someone who doesn't sit on the sidelines that everything happens to them. Like freaking get in the game and get aggressive with choosing, I am going to be the captain of this ship.
Well, this is something I tell teenagers a lot is like the storms, and let's just throw that word out for a second. Let's just say the creative burnout is going to happen in your life. Like work, especially in the year 2024, priorities are at an all-time high with work. Like I wish they weren't. I wish that wasn't a thing. That's just how it is. So these storms are inevitable. They're going to happen in your life. And I'll just tell you this story really quick. So we were at the beach a few years ago, and I like telling teenagers this. We were at the beach a few years ago, and there was a storm I saw in the distance. The only reason I saw the storm because it was behind us. And I was getting something out of the cooler, and I saw it in the distance, and I knew it was coming towards us. And so it didn't look like a rainstorm, it just kind of looked like a windstorm. So what I did is kind of put everything that needed to be put away. I put the umbrella in the ground a little farther because I knew it needed to have a good foundation. We even put the umbrella down. And over the next 5 minutes, that storm approached. I was kind of watching. I was looking at everybody else. Nobody else was getting prepared for this storm because they didn't know it was coming. And so whenever this windstorm hit us, it was the best moment. I was sitting there with my iced coffee, and I'm watching all these umbrellas from all these other people go flying into the ocean. I'm watching clothes, hats. People are losing their hats, and everybody's running around kind of trying to figure out because the windstorm was already there. But we were chilling because we knew it was coming. We were just kind of prepped for it. If we overload these little implements of joy into our life, when the storm hits, we're kind of already ready. We've already overloaded ourselves with these things that we're thankful for daily. That was something I did a few years ago. I wrote down 3 things I was thankful for every single day. And what happened is, like, as I was writing those little things down too, I began to text people that I hadn't talked to in a long time because it opened my eyes to everything that I was grateful for, which was their relationships over the years. So when you start writing 3 things down that you're thankful for every single day, you know what happens is like you kind of run out of things after a week, and you got to think a little bit more about your life and actually what has led you to the point. And what you realize, like, a lot of people helped you get to that point. And so that's what I began to do is like text those people. So then, like, when bad moments happened in my life and I had to wake up and I had, 21 things I was grateful for the week before, it kind of just bunkers you down in a bad moment. And it makes you grateful, and you have like this foundation of gratefulness that you're kind of ready for whatever happens in your life that's negative.
And so the way I think about gratitude and, happiness and joy and sneaking small moments. Like last Saturday, I got up early and went to get the girls donuts before they woke up. Like sneaking these small moments of joy in. I look at those as like a fortress against the really bad times that come, because you've prepared, you've strengthened your defenses so much. Your relationships are strong. All these things that happen, that when the hard times come, it doesn't take so much out of you because you've built this up. And you're not. I think about this in a lot of ways too. Is imagine if your stress level is constantly redlining in a normal day, and then something really additionally stressful comes on, it pushes you over the edge, right? And so I like to think of like, okay, how can I reduce my stress on a daily basis and bring it back within an operating range? I remember when I was learning to drive a manual transmission, it was always like, all right, let's keep it around, 1,500 to 2,000 RPMs for the particular vehicle I was driving at the time. And then anytime it really starts getting up to 2,300, 2,500 RPMs, pop that clutch, shift up into the next gear, And so it's like, okay, I need to find the range of RPMs that my stress level needs to stay within so that I'm operating good, so that when I start climbing a hill, I know I can downshift, right?
Well, the good thing about that too is like, if you would have asked me like what is my level, that like my max level of creative burnout 2 years ago, like that level is like that's like my green now. And that is like another thing that I think is a little beneficial about the like creative burnout is like if you get if you find that point that is like the point where you're about to go over, you kind of know that. Well, if you stretch that over a few years, and I don't even know like how you stretch that.
Well, think about it like this. Think about it working out, right?
Yeah.
So when I first started going to the gym last December, my max bench press was 135. Right. So what does that look like now? Well, it looks like we've worked on that to where now my max bench press is like 185. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite literally warming up 9 months later, 10 months later, with what used to be my max level capacity. And that's the word. The word is capacity. Yeah. You're developing your strength or your ability to do a particular task or to manage a particular load so much so that what used to, like you just said, stress you out is now your warm up. Right. That's your operating range. That's your 50 to 60% of your max, as to where back when you were just starting, not the case.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what happens just naturally over time is like, when you allow your life to kind of find what works and what doesn't work through stress, through joy, through like happiness, when you combine those three things and figure out the right balance, your capacity for stress and you know, not that it's something that you should necessarily allow in your life. It's something that is just going to always kind of be there. But your capacity for it grows over time when you fine tune it.
Yeah, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. Well, man, I appreciate this conversation today. I think there's a lot to say about hustle culture. You know, people want to make it out to be this thing, but I think it's always remembering that we are in control of our own minds. We have, you know, I love, you know, the idea of Invictus, right? There's something about when we remind ourselves that we are in control of a lot more than sometimes what we're led to believe. It allows us to use that autonomy to start making decisions that are in our best interest. Very much the same way that when you get on a plane, they're going through the safety briefing and they're like, hey, listen, if that mask comes down, you got to put that thing on yourself before you try to help somebody else. And so I love this conversation because it reminds us that if we're going to be good neighbors, if we're going to be good family members, if we're going to be good dads, husbands, wives, whatever, like we got to take care of ourselves first in a way so that we can be selfish to be selfless. Right. You know? So anything else you want to close out on?
No, that's great.
All right, guys, listen, we're thankful for you guys being back with us for episode 15.
We hit 14 of them in a row. Didn't miss one.
But
we did take a couple week break.
And that's all right.
Very much needed.
Now we're in it.
And I will say about podcasting, man, I just feel out of the groove a little bit today.
That's all right.
You've been doing like some other talking, so I think you're in the groove. But man, podcasting is like
you can get warmed up to conversation for the day,
dude. It is. Like, this is a different beast.
It is a different beast. I will also say I did a short season in another podcast with a friend of mine, and it like helped me get my speed up. Yeah. So I feel a little bit better.
And I get a lot of people have podcasts, but I applaud anyone who has the nerve to start a podcast and stay true to it for a little bit, regardless of how many people are listening. Like, this is not easy. Yeah.
If you are a regular listener of the pod, either on Spotify, Apple Music.
What are you doing? No. Like you're wasting your time. No. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's what I was going to lead to is thank you. So with that, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week for episode 16.
Peace.